M is Mayflower, Minuteman, Motown, Manatee, Mickey Mantle, Mickey Mouse, Monopoly. M can seem so mighty when it's a river rolling by. Mississippi. One of the greatest baseball players ever, Mickey Mantle was named for another great player, Mickey Cochrane. The Manatee is sometimes called a sea cow. The Mississippi River is the longest river in the U.S., stretching from Lake Itasca, Minnesota to just south of New Orleans, Louisiana. Motown introduced the world to many amazingly talented African American musicians and performers. Norman Rockwell, Niagara Falls, A Night in New Mexico, New Orleans and Native American, N is for Navajo, and NASA and Neil Armstrong, who reached the moon to find that it was one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Perhaps the country's most beloved artist, Norman Rockwell's painted everyday scenes of American life. More than 400 Native Americans from the Navajo tribe helped the United States win World War II with the Navajo language. Troop movements and battle plans were communicated through Navajo code talkers. The enemy was unable to decipher what the code talkers were saying. In 1969, the entire world watched as Neil Armstrong became the first man to set foot on the moon. Joining him on the Apollo 11 mission were Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins. The OK Corral, the Old Oregon Trail, an Old Ornery Outlaw, an Owl on a Rail, Old Faithful, Old Glory, and Good Old Doritos, and overlooking the Azores where the occasional opossum goes. The OK Corral was the site of a famous gunfight in Tombstone, Arizona in 1881. The Oregon Trail was actually a series of trails that allowed settlers to move from the eastern half of the country to the western half. Old Glory is a nickname for the U.S. flag. And peanut butter, that's the letter P. Plymouth Rock and Pilgrim's at Peril on the Sea. Rosa Parks, parades, popcorn in a pan. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where all of it began. Pikes Peak was named for Zebulon Pike, whose only attempt at climbing the mountain was unsuccessful due to a storm. Peanut butter was just one of more than 300 uses for peanuts invented George Washington Carver. Rosa Parks helped the nation understand that rights were for everyone, regardless of their skin color, period. Q is for the quill that John Hancock used to place his quiet creative signature in a most important space. It's for the American quarter and the bob white quill and the quilts that kept the Quakers warm in a Pennsylvania gale. John Hancock was the president of the Second Continental Congress, which drew up the Declaration of Independence. His large and unique signature on the Declaration of Independence became so famous that today someone may request your signature by asking for your John Hancock. Many Quakers came to America seeking religious freedom. Many settled in Pennsylvania, which was named for a Quaker, William, Pennsylvania. Ridge of the Rockies, the reflection of Mount Rainier, the regal ridge of Mount Rushmore, the ride of Paul Revere, the Roosevelts, Franklin and Teddy, Babe Ruth, rock and roll, Rosie the Riveter, the Rio Grande, and remember the Alamo. The Rocky Mountains stretch from New Mexico, Alaska. The faces of 4 presidents are carved on Mount Rushmore. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and Theodore Roosevelt. Rosie the Riveter symbolizes the role that women played in keeping the USA strong during World War II. Stand and salute the stars and stripes, a symbol to celebrate. A stripe for each of the colonies and a star for every state. Susan B. Anthony, Sierra Nevada, a steam locomotive train. Sitting Bull and Samuel Clemens, better known as Mark Twain. Old Glory isn't the only nickname for the U.S. flag. It's also known as the Stars and Stripes. There are 13 stripes on the flag, one for each of the original colonies, and there are 50 stars on the flag, one for each state. Susan B. Anthony crusaded for women's rights, including the right to vote. Sitting Bull was a great chief of the Sioux Indians. Dallas, Texas for Thanksgiving and telephone. Harry S. Truman, Harriet Tubman, and trips to the Twilight Zone. Times Square on New Year's Eve, a tasty Tootsie Roll, turning timber into a tall and towering totem pole. The tradition of Thanksgiving began with the Pilgrims before the United States was even a country. It's now celebrated on the last Thursday of November. Born into slavery, Harriet Tubman freed herself and then worked to free many, many others. Times Square Inches, New York City hosts the world's most famous New Year's Eve party every December 31st. Utah, unafraid of an upcoming storm. It's undeniably Ulysses S. Grant in his Union uniform. It's also Uncle Tom's Cabin, which helped us understand the uncommon things we must uphold for dear old Uncle Sam. The name Utah comes from a Native American word meaning people of the mountains. Ulysses S. Grant was the commander of the Union Army in the Civil War. After the war, he became the country's 18th president. Written by Harriet Beecher Stowe, Uncle Tom's Cabin taught much of the nation about slavery. And the valor they displayed in vying for vital victories and the sacrifices they made. V is for Virginia and Vermont and Vikings, too. It seems they got here long before Columbus was able to. Veterans are people who have served their country in the armed forces. Many people gave their lives fighting for the United States of America. 4 of the first 5 presidents were born in Virginia: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe. While Christopher Columbus often gets the credit, it's now believed that Viking Leif Erikson was the first European to reach North America. West Virginia, Walt Disney, a wagon trail, World War I and World War II, the World Series, and John Wayne. W stands for Washington, who entered at Valley Forge, city, state, and president, all named for him. By George. After leading the American armies in the Revolution, George Washington became the first president of the United States. Washington was the first man to sign the Constitution of the United States of America. George Washington is the only U.S. president who didn't live in the White House. It wasn't completed until after he left office. Washington believed he was first and foremost a farmer. He introduced the mule to American farming. The letter X should remind us of the importance of election day when all Americans, rich and poor, are allowed to have their say. Some were told they couldn't vote if they couldn't write their name. So they signed the ballot with a little x and it counted just the same. Free elections are one of the most cherished and important practices of a democracy. Early in our nation's history, only white men were allowed to vote. But amendments to our Constitution gave voting rights to men and women of every race. Local elections are held at various times, but national elections are held on the first Tuesday in November. Why can make you hungry, as Yogi Bear has shown. Our yonder you'll find Y for Yosemite and Yellowstone. The Y can be a place for fun like the YMCA, and in the Bronx, it's Yankee Stadium where the New York Yankees play. Yellowstone National Park is located mostly in Wyoming, but extends into Montana and Idaho as well. Yosemite National Park is located in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California. The New York Yankees are probably the most famous sports team in American history. Z is for Zane Grey, who wrote stories about the West. Z is also for zip codes, but I think I'd like best for Z to remind us of Whitcomb Judson, as clever as he could be. He gave us the magical zipper in 1893. The United States Post Office added zip codes to mailing addresses in 1963. Whitcomb Judson actually called his invention a class plotter, and it wasn't designed for clothes. It was originally designed to replace shoestrings on shoes. 14 years after Judson's death, the B.F. Goodrich Company began calling his device a zipper because of the way it sounded. It's a special place, this land of ours, from sea to shining sea. And now you know it from America's A all the way to Zipper's Z.